Hi guys, welcome back. We are working today on a 2013 XC90, that's a P2 platform with the Euro 4 engine on it. Euro 4 engine being the one with the black and silver engine cover. Looks a lot like this one. And if with your own Volvo you have an inexplicable power loss where you've got no kind of diagnostic trouble codes, you've got no kind of OBD codes, but you have a noticeable loss in power, particularly when you accelerate, stick around. This video may well be the one for you. It's an easy fix, so let's crack on. Now this car came to me after a number of other mechanics have had a crack at it, largely for the swirl flaps. There'll be a video up on the channel in relation to that. So this arm had popped off here, there was loads of oil spewing out, and we got a huge pressure leak, a boost pressure leak. So the whole of the top of the engine had to come off, new engine mount, a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's not the main issue. This car has, for the longest time, when it warms up, had a drop in power, a really noticeable drop in power. Now, not enough to actually register any kind of error codes in the system that you could sort of make sense of and say, oh, it's this sensor or it's that pump or whatever, but just a noticeable loss of acceleration. So when it's cold, it pulls like a train. It's an absolutely fantastic engine, really pushes you back in your seat, which is unusual for an old bus like this. So a really solid engine, but when it heats up, so after about 10-15 minutes of running, and if you turn it off and on again when it's hot, then the acceleration, it's like it's in limp mode. It revs, but it doesn't actually get that power into the wheels. And this is a really common problem. Now, I've seen some content on YouTube where people are saying, oh yeah, these things last the life of the engine, and I've seen others where they're fairly disparaging about the reliability of this particular component in question. But my own experience is that if you haven't changed one of these recently, you're probably about to. What we're talking about here is the fuel rail pressure sensor. So this is the fuel rail here. You can see the high pressure rail. It's fed from the high pressure pump, which is there, fed into the rail, which kind of comes out through these 5 pipes here into the 5 injectors. On the left hand end of that we have the high pressure fuel pressure sensor, and on the right hand end over here we have a pressure relief valve. So if there's too much pressure in the pipe, this valve allows it to drain off back into the tank, in much the same way that the leak off from the cylinders allows unused fuel that's been squirted to the cylinder, to the injector rather, to get back to the tank as well. So what I'm looking at is that sensor there being slightly unreliable. It's a weird thing to say, but slightly is really all you need to be talking about for the calculations of the fuel air mix in the engine control unit to be wrong to the point where there is a noticeable drop off in power. So that's the theory anyway. I'm not one really to load the parts cannon, particularly with parts that cost so much. So a new high pressure fuel pressure sensor on this particular car is somewhere between 50 and 60 quid. If you get one from the dealer, probably 3-4 times that. Aftermarket ones are available, and indeed it's a component that's used by lots of other modern vehicles, so you won't have any difficulty finding one. But because I do have a bunch of diagnostic computers, I ran a few checks and tests. So what I did was I wrote down on a scrap of paper all of the values from the data stream in the engine control unit, all of the full power. So let's say this is the cold side before it warms up, so the engine, the oil temperature was 46 degrees, written down all the values, then heated it right the way up, heat soaked the whole engine, switched it off and on again, and it kind of felt like that hesitant limp mode, and wrote out all the values again. And there is really only a couple of the values that are different. Obviously the engine temperature this was at 90 degrees, that was at half of that temperature. But really the big one here is the fuel pressure. Now on tick over, when it was running, really pulling, really sort of firing on all cylinders, hard acceleration and so on, we were showing about 106 HPA. When it was hot, that flitted between 76 and about 90, so it was lower than was actually in the rail because the engine was ticking over. It hadn't changed at all So it was kind of flitting forwards and backwards. And the other really noticeable thing, I didn't see this myself, but I had an assistant driving along with me in the passenger seat, of course, watching that same data stream, who noticed that when you accelerate hard, this value, whatever the value was at that particular point, because of course when you accelerate it'll be higher than 76, it was kind of getting to a point about 500, 5,500 and sticking. And that is a real problem, because it needs to send live real-time data to the engine control unit in order for the ECU to be able to adjust the air mix, to be able to adjust the time that the injectors are open in each cycle. That's called the duty cycle. So the amount of fuel that was going in. And effectively what that means is that if there's less pressure being reported by the pressure sensor than is actually in the pipe, it means the ECU is going to try and compensate for that by keeping the injectors open for longer, so it'll be running fuel rich. And similarly, it'll also reduce, using the electronic throttle control valve, the amount of air that's going into the system, or dilute it with air from the EGR valve, which is already oxygen depleted, so it's running double rich. And the effect, the hesitancy, is caused by it bogging down when it runs fuel rich. Now after a few seconds it catches up on itself, that clears, and it slowly creeps up to speed. It's not a true limp mode where it caps the engine revs at 2,500. And one of the noticeable features about this problem is that if you are revving it, it'll rev pretty much to the red line standing still, but it's when you're driving that you notice the power is down. So yeah, I think this this pressure sensor is our issue. It's a super easy thing to remove, super easy thing to replace, and really, as long as you can stomach the cost, then it's really a quick and easy job to do. So let's crack on. You will need one specialist tool for this, and that is a 27mm combination spanner, because the space that we have to work in is too small to accommodate the prongs on a normal spanner, but absolutely perfect to accommodate the ring on the other end of the same. So 27mm, that's what we need. Now before I put this pad down, there's one other thing that independently confirms this same suspicion, which is the lambda sensor was picking up a difference. So before, when it was cold and running powerfully, when the fuel pressure sensor was, I believe, working, you can see a reading of 1. Now lambda is a scale that was kind of invented, I believe, by Volvo in the first place, and the sensor picks up on the air to fuel mixture. So 1 is dead on. However, when it heats up, independently the lambda sensor is reporting that we've got a fuel rich state. 0.2 to 0.47, so less than 1 shows fuel rich, greater than 1 shows it's running lean. So definitely in this instance the lambda sensor independently confirms that the fuel pressure is probably wrong, and that the engine at that point in time, just on tick over all of this, was running fuel rich, very fuel rich. So hopefully changing this sensor out is not only going to get rid of this hesitancy, it's also going to massively increase the efficiency of this engine. Now, just to bring you in for a close-up, I'm going to have to freehand this here. You can see that there is 3 wires coming out of the left-hand end of it. That black part, as discrete from the grey part next to it, is the bit that unclips. You can see, if you look over the top there's a little plastic doofer. If you could easily squeeze that end of it, then you'd be able to just pull the thing off in one move. However, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my fingernail here underneath that very gently to just pull that forwards. Okay, you can see there that's just unclipped it, and now that should kind of push out. I'm just going to have to grab this with my other hand. There is a little rubber gasket on this that makes it a bit of a tight fit. That red thing there. But that's it. So that's now disconnected. This piece here is what we need to get the spanner onto. And if you're really careful, you can see here you can get a ring spanner in there. And that really is all you need to do to spin that off. And then fit the new one on. And there it is. That is the sensor in question. They don't last forever, and as I say, once again, combination spanner, all you need to get that out and in. I'll put the code up on the screen now, just so that you've got that. So there you go, just a quickie today. I mean, there's no point in making you watch a thing being untwisted and retwisted, but it is a simple matter with the right spanner to twist that out of there, put the replacement unit in, and just twist the new one back in, plug it in, and away you go. So it's a super easy job, and a really difficult thing to diagnose, because it really leaves no trace. You'll be chasing ghosts around the system for ages. There are a ton of sensors that feed the engine control unit, everything from your mass airflow sensor, your manifold absolute pressure sensor, 2 temperature sensors, a lambda sensor, there's one on the CAT as well, a diagnostic sensor in this particular engine. There are loads and loads of things that all feed the ECU, and if they fail completely, if a wire breaks, if the sensor completely fails, then it will definitely throw a diagnostic trouble code. But this is just running 25–30% under performance, and that's just enough to bugger up the fuel mix, but not enough to throw a DTC. So if you have any of the symptoms on the screen, and I'll just flick up a full list here of things that sort of this particular sensor can be responsible for, if you have any of these things, definitely suspect this. And as I say, if it's not been changed in the life of the car, chances are this is your problem. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Take it easy, guys. Hope that's been helpful. If it has, as always, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Cheers.